Hi, everybody. My name is Asad Zafar. I'm 25 and I work for the Love Tank CIC, which is a community interest company promoting the health and well-being of underserved communities. This live discussion for you today is in collaboration with our Maureen project, which is a project promoting the health and well-being needs of queer migrant men and queer men of color living in London. And today I'm really excited to host this event with some amazing queer Muslims, queer people of faith who also live in London. And yeah, we're excited to bring this conversation to you today. And very shortly, I will be introducing our panelists to you. And you can drop any questions at any point into the chat function, and we'll be answering them as the conversation goes along. Amazing. So we have all of our panelists on board now. Kesar, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey y'all, this is Kazar here. This is not my home, this is my office. I work alongside Assad at Team Prepster / the Love Tank as vaccine coordinator. So you might have seen me sticking needles into beautiful people's arms. Unfortunately, I'm not one of them, but it's good to be here. I'm not telling you my age. You can fight me for my birth certificate. And I'm very happy to be talking with these other lovely people in this room today.
Amazing. Thanks, Kesar. And Haris, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Haris. I am just a business analyst doing business analyst things from a 9 to 5 in the city. I'm 32. I'm a queer Muslim, and I've been living in London for a good about 7-8 years now.
Amazing. Fergie? You're on mute, Fergie.
Let me mute. Hi everyone, I'm Fergie. I'm from Pakistan. I immigrated to London when I was 12. I'm 30 years old and I work in UX in the tech industry.
Amazing. We've got an amazing bunch. I'm really excited to get the conversation going. Firstly, how has everyone's days been? How are we feeling? Feeling good?
I'm seeing Beyonce tomorrow, so I'm excited.
So am I. I'm seeing Beyonce tomorrow as well. I think we're all we're just thinking about that. This is just the prelude to that. Yeah.
This is Beyonce Freeze. Well, I'm seeing her on Sunday and it's her last show in London, so I'm really looking forward to it. And I'm seeing Kelly Rowland on Saturday, so...
I hate the fact
When you
that
sing Michelle?
Huh?
When you sing Michelle?
I don't know.
I don't think Michelle's coming for the Mighty Hoopla, but I'm so jealous that I didn't get my Hoopla tickets.
Well, I'll be there for work.
Can I just say that the way that Harris said business analyst just immediately made me think of the two, Lisa Kudrow and Mira Sorvino in Romeo and Michelle's high school reunion, being like, "Oh, we're business women. We're here for the business business lunch, please.
Oh,
is there a business special?"
My dad invented the toaster strudel, and I invented post-it glue.
Yeah. She's a boss ass bitch who is about her business. That's who she is. Cool.
And that's what we're about to do today. Mm-hmm. So, first question I have for you all, just to get the ball rolling, is, as far as you can all remember, you're all a lot older than me. I'm a dainty person.
I hate you.
I'm going to slap you when you're in the office. Yeah.
I'm joking.
How very dare you.
Who was your first crush? Who can you remember being your first crush? We were like, wow, you're pretty. Mm-hmm. Who'd like to go first?
Me.
I have to, but yeah, go on.
All right, cool. First of all, it's a toss-up between either the Velociraptor in Jurassic Park, because she had the nails, and I was like, okay, I see that I can do that too. But no, in all seriousness, I think it probably, and I was very young at the time, okay? I kind of think Sam Neill in Jurassic Park, because I saw that was the first movie I saw in the cinema as a kid. So I remember looking at thinking, something's really dashing about this guy in the blue shirt and the red hanky thing. And I was very, very young. So for me, seeing that kind of kind, but also extremely smart figure on screen, dressing in, not even being like traditional superhero type, but just using his wits and his smarts to save the day, which I thought was very attractive. But, also the T-Rex could get it. So there's that too. Yeah, that's who my first crush was.
Wait, and guess what? How old were you, if you remember?
That is none of your goddamn business. I'm telling you.
Okay, fine.
And
You're trying to
some
figure
of
out the
us,
age.
I mean, you might think you're the youngest in this room, but trust, it doesn't show.
I know it doesn't. Leave me alone. Maggie, what about you?
So I've got two. First one was Power Rangers, Jason the Red Ranger. I always wanted to be Kimberly, and I was like obsessed with Kimberly, and I thought Kimberly and Jason were gonna get together before Tommy came, whatever the case is. And then the second one is, I don't know if anyone watched Baywatch Hawaii with Jason Momoa back in when he was 19 years old.
Ooh.
The beauty that was that man at the time. I mean, he's beautiful now as well, but when he was in Baywatch, I that's my earliest, like I can remember being like, I want my husband to look like that. And I was like, what, 7 maybe or 6?
But see, that's what's so interesting, because like even with me, when I remember my earliest ever crush, I was in year 3. So and I didn't know it was a crush then. I just remember feeling intense. I was just staring down my head teacher.
Like what? Like people were watching Baywatch for Pamela Anderson, and I was not. I was like, I want to be Pamela Anderson because she's beautiful and amazing, but I was like the men. I was like, oh my god, wow.
But same, I think I was about 6 or 7 as well, where like sexuality is not, you don't know it's sexuality. You don't know this is attraction. You're just like infatuated. And you're like, wow, why am I drawn to you?
Yeah.
For me, it was my head teacher of my primary school at the time, Mr. Drew. Shout out if you're watching this. Oh, gorgeous specimen. And then also the man, I think his name was Steve or something. It was this white man who presented a show called Deadly 60 on CBBC.
Oh, Steve Actual. He was hot.
That's it, Steve Bradshaw. Oh,
that girl.
Let me Google.
I was like,
Google
daddy's
right
handling
now.
some snakes. It's cool. It's fine.
That's the thing. He was a bit of me. He still is a bit of me. But again, I was very young and I didn't know that was a crush. And that's instantly where I was like, wait, I'm a bit different, because children around me are talking about girls and girl crushes, whereas I'm liking this guy in Deadly 60, etc. So that's really interesting. And Harris, what about you? I'm excited to hear this one.
I thought it was really interesting that both Fergie and Kessa went to something that comes from like more of a cartoon / sort of like alternative non kind of like, not Jurassic Park isn't cartoon, but like maybe non sort of like, maybe not, yeah. But mine was Wolverine. I had a friend who lived 2 houses down who gave me my first sort of comic book. And I remember I wanted to be Storm, but my side eye was kind of like at this like Wolverine. I was like, who's he? And I think the second person was like when I was young, my dad and I used to watch the very few bonding moments we ever had. My dad used to watch Baywatch, and it used to be followed up by Gladiators. So Baywatch, for some reason, I don't have a memory of, but for some reason, I just have this vision of like these gladiators. There's like sort of like the blonde haired, like the guy from Rocky type, like buff dudes fighting on podiums. And I remember thinking like, I like this. I want to go there.
Right. That would be me with I used to be in Bradford, and all my cousins were really into wrestling, so they'd be watching WWE or like WrestleMania and all that stuff, and I'd be there like, yeah, but I just went to see the shirtless men because I was like, yeah, that's a bit of me.
So you're all really into himbos the whole time.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because I grew up being into himbos, and then now I'm not necessarily that much into himbos, which is like very fascinating how that's changed.
If you become the himbo, you don't need to be with one another.
Very
true words to live by.
So going off of like our crushes whenever we realized we first were attracted to people outside of like the heteronormative box, when did you know that you were queer, or when did you first get that inkling that I'm different? Who'd like to go first?
I think if I can speak on my experience, I grew up in Pakistan, and sexuality is not discussed there at all. But even heterosexuality is not really expressed outside of just marriage. Over here in the West, when you come here, you see heterosexuality being expressed through touch, through kisses, through public displays of affection. You don't necessarily see that in Pakistan, especially growing up in the 90s. And it wasn't until I was 12 when I came to England and I immigrated here that I found out and discovered that, there's not only different sexualities, but there's a term for what I am, which is because I've never felt attraction to women in my life and sexually. And my parents are very much about the life of we're not going to get involved in you getting married. So if you're, we're never going to force someone to get married. We're not going to play a part in it. You need to find whoever you need to get married to, blah, blah, blah. So I had that never fear of, one day I'm going to get married because my parents are going to pick someone for me and then put me in that category or whatever. But yeah, it wasn't until I was 12, 13 and I came to England and I discovered, because people used to use the term gay in school, and that's when I discovered, there's a whole spectrum of different things, and this is specifically what I am.
It's really interesting that you mentioned Pakistan, and I think that has been carried here to the West within our culture, that it's very taboo to speak about sex, or even being romantic with a partner.
Oh, did y'all have to change channels when you saw people kissing on TV?
Oh, yeah.
Kissing.
I didn't, because my parents, it's not, I did because I felt uncomfortable while watching it with my parents, but it wasn't that my parents were like, we can't watch this, we can't watch this. My parents would just, like, they would get embarrassed or shy in their face, and seeing them get embarrassed and shy, I would get embarrassed and shy, and I'm like, change the channel.
It's like my media diet growing up was just intense violence and bad language on screen. So like formative movie memories for me are like Martin Scorsese's oeuvre, everything from Goodfellas to Casino, Godfather, all these movies with mostly men doing very violent things to each other, being very sweary, and obviously very little room in there for any kind of romance, because the moment you see kissing on screen, you got to change the channel. So I was watching really, really crazy movies at that age and thinking, and then I'm going to watch like American Beauty or Eyes Wide Shut in this joint, am I? But it's all good.
Yeah, I watched a lot of like Indian movies growing up. So the closest depiction of like sex or intimacy was very much like the flowers crashing together.
Two flowers together, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And there was a lot of like kissing for me was very much like I didn't even know faces were involved, because like anytime there was a kiss, like all you see is the back of somebody's head, because it would always kind of cut to like in a way, and it would just. So that was my first references. I was like, this is what intimacy is, like inanimate objects smashing next to each other, joy.
I think the first kiss I saw on Bollywood cinema was Shamita Shetty and Uday Chopra in Mohabbaten. And I thought, oh my God, kiss? They kiss in that? What? This is brand new information. If I can like go back to information. If I can go back to the question real quick, I would say the summertime when I turned 14. Yeah, it was more or less like I can almost pinpoint the exact day when it was almost like a light switch. Now, obviously, like looking back on that now, I recognize it wasn't as binary as one day you're gay, one day you're not, but just more of that immediate self-knowledge that recontextualizes every experience you've had up until that point of, oh my God, that's what that is. It's kind of terrifying if it happens that quickly. If there's like a sudden boom, eureka moment. Is what it is.
I think for me, I realized very early on when I was literally in like year 3. So I remember it being as early as when I was in primary school before I moved schools, where I was there from year 4 till year 11. So it was before that. So I was in about year 2 or year 3, and I'd have crushes on boys, or I'd befriend the pretty boys. And I knew it was because I thought that they were pretty, or I liked the look of their face. Again, I didn't know that to mean that I was gay. I didn't know there was a term for it, but I knew that there was something more there. And that's when I realized, I was like, okay, I can't be this way, because my mum would pick me up from primary school and be like, oh, so did you chill with your best friend today? Who I pretended I had a crush on. Her name was Amara. She's now happily married with a child. We love that for her. And yeah, I realized that early on that I had to shield myself from the questions that I'd get if I mentioned that I was hanging around with the pretty boys, because I thought they were pretty. So I think it was as early on as year 3, year 2, year 3, where I'd have been about 6, 7 years old, where I realized I was different for me. But yeah.
Did anyone else have that thing where your parents would be so glad about you not wanting to hang around with girls so much? Be like, oh no, he's just hanging around with the boys. Like, yeah.
I had the complete opposite reaction. Like I had 95% of my friends are girls, and also 95% of my cousins are girls. So my parents would never be like, oh, he's hanging out with too many girls. My parents would just automatically make it, that he's hanging out with girls because he's got a crush on them and they're dating. He's gonna date them, or he wants to get married to them. And even to this day, like Teresa, who's my best friend, I've known her since she was a teenager, and my parents know her, and they always just assume we were gonna get married. And now she's married, and my parents are like, so what are you? And I'm like, I just have to keep quiet. But like, she's my best friend. What else do you want me to do?
But she's your best friend, yeah.
My parents always want. Oh, sorry.
No, go for Harris.
No, I'm saying my parents always wanted me to make more boyfriends because I think I was always a soft boy, like from childhood, and I think I used to hang out a lot with girls. I think they made that some kind of a connection quite quickly, and it was like damage control, and they were always like pushing me to like go do this like massive sport thing, like make. And I was like, no, I just want to like come from school and then call my friend on the phone who I've spent the whole day with and talk for another 3 hours on the phone about like what we were doing 3 hours ago.
Literally, be like hop onto MSN and whatnot and just chat.
AOL.
God, MSN.
MSN.
See, I
MySpace.
remember MSN, okay, I remember that stuff.
Wait, did you have MySpace though? Cause
No,
oh, see, you're
I
not.
remember, I remember High Five and Walk Up because of my sisters. Like those
High
other,
Five used to be a thing, man.
yeah. No, but for me, I remember my parents put me in a boys' school because they wanted to have me not be distracted. They didn't want girls to distract me, and I very clearly remember my mum saying this, saying, "We want you to focus on your parai, your education, etc., because we don't want you to be very sunny.
Come on, son. Okay.
Because we don't want you to be distracted from your studies." But then they put me into a school with all boys, all very, very horny kids, and it became even. It was something. Going into that, going to school in the UK and Pakistan, for you, Fergie, I want to ask you, what was it like? What was your experience being part of an ethnic minority in London and in Pakistan? Like, obviously in Pakistan, you'd be the majority.
I wasn't an ethnic minority, so it wasn't a thing for me.
Yeah,
but there was a class difference.
So
they used to, in Pakistan, there was definitely a class difference in school. But in England, it's so funny. I grew up watching in Pakistan a lot of American shows, and my thinking was that British schools are going to be like American schools, where everyone's going to have lockers and everyone's going to go to school without wearing uniforms and whatnot. It's going to be amazing. And then I come to England and I have to wear a fucking uniform and there's no lockers unless I pay for it. And I came at a very hard time because it was secondary school, teenagers, which are generally horrible people in the hormones and whatnot, and cliques. Everyone was very cliqued. I went to a very diverse school in East London, and everyone had groups. So white people were in one group, black people were in one group, South Asian people were in one group. And it was interesting because I wanted to be friends with everyone, obviously. South Asian kids, boys especially, were into cricket, and I fucking hate cricket with every passion. And like, I don't get cricket. I'm not excited about cricket. And then they discovered I was from Pakistan, so they were like, "Oh, come play cricket with us." And I was like, "I would rather not." So I never got to be friends with them. And they were also very much like, "You're not like you weren't born here. You have an accent." And I was okay. Like, what do you want me to do about that? And then I didn't get along with the white kids because the culture was a huge difference. Like, they went out drinking and partying and doing God knows what. Like, I went to a house party. This is like one of the earliest memories, and it freaked me the hell out. I went to a house party for a birthday for one of my friends, and her 6-year-old brother was drinking beer.
Oh,
yeah. I'm not about that culture. I'm not about that life. That wasn't my zone either. So I think for the
I love how that doesn't faze me in the slightest.
But like for the first 2 or 3 years of school, I was quite alone. Like even during break time and lunchtime, because I didn't fit anywhere. And half of these people knew each other since primary school, and they've been friends for years. It wasn't until I started making some of my friends that are still my best friends now, where I felt like, okay, now I've settled into this country. I belong here. I've made friends, and 99% of my friends are immigrants as well. So it's a very interesting thing. That's something that we always talk about, which is like 99% of my friends weren't born here. They came here as kids. They came here much earlier than I did. But because of the familiarity between our experiences of coming here and feeling lost and whatnot, that's how we became close.
I wanted to ask, moving here from Pakistan, coming into like the British education system, how was it for you navigating your queerness once you've moved into a completely different environment where there was maybe some more representation, or it was spoken about a bit more?
It was far more difficult. Pakistan, nobody called me slurs. nobody mentioned anything about sexuality. Nobody even talked about it. Like I grew up wearing nail polish and putting mehndi on during wedding season, and dancing to Bollywood, and that isn't necessarily seen as a feminine thing in Pakistan. Well, the nail polish and the mehndi, yes, but the dancing isn't. Whereas if I was to do that here in school, kids would hear about it instant, like slurs called out, whatnot. And I think that's why it took me such a long time to even accept the fact that I was gay and come out, was because from the moment that I understood, because I understood what my sexuality was at the same time as people were calling me slurs, because people were calling me gay, and that's how I discovered what gay was. And then I was like, oh, there's a negative connotation to it. And so for me, it was just a hard time combining the two, which was, okay, now that I'm aware of my sexuality, on one hand, it's great because I have a word for it, I can describe it. I don't feel as confused about who I am. But on the negative side, there's a huge like, people don't like you for it, people like make fun of you of it. Everyone can join in, like enemies that don't talk to each other will fully join in calling you slurs. So for me, it was just like it had a huge impact on me fully accepting myself. I think I'm still on that journey, but it's a much better journey now than it was back then.
Honestly, I feel like same here. When I grew up, hearing you're gay, or that's gay, this is gay, that everything was framed in a negative light, and it was always, just said to be gay. That's something I've still unlearned over the last like 3.5 years, where it was ingrained within me to be like, oh, if something's cringy, or if something's not a bit of me, to say, oh, that's gay. But that's because that was instilled within me growing up in the UK school system, where now I'm just like, no, it's rewording it. That is cringy, because why am I going to assign the word gay to something that's cringy or whatnot? It's just, changing that narrative. How about you, Kessler and Harris, growing up?
What's blessed for me is that I had such incredible naivety throughout all of high school, with a very strong sense of not knowing how people actually saw me or how people received me, because that way I was just able to get through most of high school literally not giving the slightest fuck about how people look at my social life or my spiritual life or whatever. Unlike some of the other experiences talked about so far, there wasn't really as much segregation in the Northeast London high school. Instead, what you got was more people coalescing over activities. Sorry, coalescing? People working together and hanging out together on the basis of the activities that they did, rather than along racial or religious lines. You would sometimes see some correlations there, like obviously the kids in the film club more likely to be white, the kids in the cricket club more likely to be brown, yada yada. But overall, it was very well integrated, and I'm just reflecting on the fact that I was in high school basically when Section 28 had more or less just been repealed. It was repealed while I was in high school. So teachers having to go from a version of sex education that was extremely hush-hush and talking about things in a backhanded way, in a way that doesn't quite, in a way that implies non-normative sexuality, to then overnight literally having the ability to speak much more openly about it and talk about gay sex and homosexuality and bisexuality in much more open terms. It was like night and day. I can actually remember the difference in quality between the year 7 sex education lessons I had versus year 10 and 11. And of course, like, I wondered the degree to which the mystique surrounding homosexuality and the fact that people couldn't really talk about it under Section 28 is what gave the term gay so much power as a negative, as a term of negative connotation. Because, you go back into schools these days, people just don't really say that anymore. It's really not that common for people to use gay as a pejorative anymore. I remember seeing that when I was working at Stonewall a couple of years ago and going into schools as part of the education team, and the amount of work that's been done in the subsequent however many years is really quite remarkable. So it's incredible the impact that repeal of Section 28 has had, and I'm glad that I was at high school at a time when it was being able to actually see that being repealed.
I was like, you had sex education?
Yeah, I was just about to say
that's a thing. I did, because I did half and half, like Fergie talked about. So my parents and myself moved to Pakistan when I was about like 12ish. So I did like some of my sort of formative schooling there, and then I came back when I was like 16. And my experiences there, I had a great time. Like I was like the queen bee in school. My school was like I think there wasn't a lot of class divides there. The only thing I had to combat during school was this classic sort of masculine, feminine, that machismo sort of culture that often sort of like surrounds like, you know, like South Asianness. So the whole soft boy thing kind of was something I had to constantly navigate. But when I moved back to England around 16, it was horrendous. And, you know, like the whole narrative of like this Western sort of like progressive like schooling space was a complete shamble because I was my school was very sort of non-integrated. It was quite diverse, but you had like the white kids, the rich white kids, the white kids whose parents could take them to the West End, the brown kids, and then like Fergie said, like I didn't fit anywhere on there, and I was sitting there thinking like, and on top of that, I'm gay, because that was another isolating experience that I felt like it didn't fit into any of those boxes that I was seeing. So I remember being very depressed and very lonely during those like 5 or 6 years before school ended. Yeah, it was weird, wasn't it? And I missed out on sex education, I suppose, because that's not a concept in my Pakistani school. And then I think, I mean, I couldn't even say with authority, but I think maybe there's a window to what sex education happens in England. But
yeah, I didn't. Yeah, same. For me, sex education was extremely heterosexual and very limited to just wear condoms. Not even like enough information about STDs or anything. They were just like wear condoms. They had like one time they had a banana and a condom or like a dildo and a condom today, but I wasn't in that day and I missed it. And I was like, damn it. But yeah, nothing about any of the sexualities that were ever mentioned.
Yeah, even for me in school, because I remember we had our sex education. It was literally just one lesson in around year 7, year 7 or year 8, where they literally just had a condom demonstration, and that's what it was.
Yeah.
And
did I go to some super progressive school or something?
I feel like you did. I was like, when did this happen?
No, this is standard like state school, bog standard stuff. So I'm very surprised to hear that, you know, y'all have the likes of a very poor sex education.
I have a housemate who is a secondary school teacher, and now they celebrate Pride in school. And I was like, Jesus, I mean, I love that for kids, but where the fuck was this when I was in school?
But that's the thing. We wish we had that when we were at school.
Yes.
I wanted to ask you all that do you feel like, so after we've left school, we're navigating the world, okay, I'm realizing I'm different, I'm queer, I'm trying to step into that and discover who I am. Do you feel like you reassessed maybe before or after coming out your relationship with Islam while you were coming out? And if so, how was that for you? Or how is it, even if it's still going on?
I mean, this feels like far too long a conversation. I mean, I'm only going to zero in on a couple of moments because otherwise we'd be here all day. But I certainly had the initial experience of playing into the purity politics that surrounds a lot of conservative Islamic doctrine, which is that there's something wrong with you, there's something dirty with you, and dear God, please take it out of me. Like pull into my body and pull out this unholy desire. And, you know, you pray on it, you feel dirty every time you climax, you know, that kind of thing. I think I struggled with that for at least a good 4 or 5 years until university, when I started to come to peace with it and realized that I had a right to that kind of stuff.
For myself, I think the whole element of like what I was thinking, experiencing was wrong. I think it was kind of the religious and cultural aspect were a bit more homogenized for me. So I thought it wasn't specifically pointing back towards sort of like religion for me. It was just something that's kind of homogenized and surrounded me for a bit. It was later that I kind of understood like sort of like some of the connections people were making for me to tell me like what justifying like sort of their sort of ways of thinking or sort of imposing how I should be thinking or behaving. So I did have a moment where I kind of did feel quite dissociated from religion and didn't find it sort of inclusive to me. But again, I grew up in a family that is not very practicing. Culturally, we're very sort of religious in terms of sort of like how we sort of live and behave. So I think there was a bit of a journey going to then reconcile with it, because I think it was just so much ingrained in me. Like I grew up listening to all these stories that sort of come from the Quran, which fascinated me because I sort of love like this. I associated them with almost comic book stories to a degree. All of these legends as well. So it kind of felt like I was also denying myself a part of me. So I think it's tough. It's like a patchwork for me still. So there's elements of it that I take from it, and there's elements that I haven't sort of still reconciled with. But I think that's kind of how it weaved for me.
I think it's similar for myself, as you just said, Harris, where my family are more culturally religious. With me, when I came out, I realized for me it was I can either be one or the other. So when I finally said out loud that that I'm gay, it was like, okay, I need to denounce Islam completely. I never did, because I knew that's what others would want me to do, including family, friends, etc. But I instead went a bit, I wouldn't say off the wagon, but I just wouldn't. Being Muslim was a separate identity to me that I just locked away in the cupboard. I left it. I wouldn't go to the mosque. I wouldn't pray. There was one Ramadan that came around where I just didn't attach myself to it at all. And that was again because of what I put a lot of substance into what people were saying around me, what a lot of UK Muslims were saying to me, that you're going to hell, etc. This, that, the other. You heard that before, so I'm not going to go into it too much. And it took a while for me to unlock that drawer, bring my two identities together, and like dissect that all and be like, wait, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made me perfect. He doesn't make mistakes. So I'm this way. This is not a choice. I am who I am, and it's okay to be who I am. And it was a long road, like that yellow brick road Dorothy goes up, to patch these two forms of my identities together, to realize that I'm not one or the other. I'm both and I'm neither. I'm just Asad. And like I can be gay and I can be Muslim, and it isn't an issue because of what other people say to me. And at the end of the day, as it is for everybody, your relationship between you and your faith, your spirituality, is between you and God. It's got nobody has a right to speak on it. And it's until I got that power back myself into not holding value into what others said and only knowing what I say goes, is where I was like, damn, I can do this. I can be this person. I can speak on this a bit. I can go to the mosque with a bit of a dangly earring because no one's going to stop me walking in.
Yeah.
Even if I bring my shalwar up, like obviously I'd like my shalwar. My shalwar kameez, I'd like bringing the arms up because, bicep looking cute, having my tats, which is not the norm. No one can say anything to me because no one is going to deny me entry into this mosque.
They can't.
I'll get the stairs, I'll get the looks. Again, culturally, I shouldn't be there because what you're doing, but nobody will vocalize that. And the ones that do is, again, deep hatred indoctrined within them, etc. But it was realizing that I'm going to give people less power and my religion is between me and God, period, end of.
Can I just say something? Like, don't you got to love the moment where a lot of these, like, let's be real, ulema types or people who pretend that they're part of the ulema will be all like, only God can judge you, that there is no intercessor between man and God in Islam, but feel so confident about being input hose on theology that like, Allah knows best. But by the way, this is about your behavior. I'm like, okay, I'm going to need you to back up and just go back to that first thing you said. Because if Allah knows best, you will keep your mouth closed and you will turn around and walk away from me because I don't need to hear the rest of this. But yes, sorry, Fergie, you were going to get your
No, I was going to say, I had a very interesting experience because I grew up in Pakistan where, Friday prayers, like people don't work full days on Fridays because for Friday prayers, everyone works half day, school's half day. And I grew up in a very homogenized religion and culture, both very Islamically. And my mom was a very much, she used to be like, my dad used to be like, you need to pray. And my mom used to be like, stop telling them to pray, because if they're going to pray because of you, they're not doing it out of heart. They're doing it to please you. And that destroys the whole purpose of prayer. So she kind of instilled on me very young age, which was, if you're going to do anything, do it because you actually want to do it and you mean it. Don't do it because other people are telling you to do it. And growing up in school in Pakistan, you get Islamic studies, which you read about the Quran, you like go about interpreting and whatnot. And one of the things always that I got told was Allah's merciful, Allah's merciful, Allah's merciful. So when I became a teenager and homophobia was rife, and you would hear Muslims talking about homosexuals, and they'll be like, be hateful. And I'm like, those two things don't match. How can on one hand the Quran continuously say Allah's merciful, and then you make it out to be that Allah's just the most vengeful being on this whole universe and just ready to just put everyone in hell? So that always used to confuse me, and I never used to believe them because I used to be like, that just makes no sense to me. And then I used to be like, and I went through phases, which was, okay, when I came out to my friends, I was like, okay, I'm gay, but I'm not going to practice it. Because Islam, like leaving Islam was never a question in my life, like thing. I never wanted to leave it, and I never thought about leaving it. So I was like, okay, I'm gay. That's part of my life. I can't change it. But what I can change is being attracted to men and doing something about it. So I'm never going to fall in love. I'm never going to get married. I'm never going to have sex. I'm never going to do any of these things.
Not acting on it. Yeah.
Not acting on it. I won't go to hell because, you know, people say if you act on it, you're going to go to hell. And I did that for a couple of years. And that led to me being incredibly just unhappy because I love love. I'm like one of the most romantic. I'm into romance so much. Bollywood, Hollywood, every kind of romance. I'll cry watching like Happy Feet or something. So for me, it was just not authentic to me to be like, okay, I'm not gonna get married. I'm not gonna have, you know, I'm never gonna fall in love. It was just unnatural to me. Then I was like, okay, I'm going to get married. I went through phases. I'm going to get married or I'm going to fall in love with a guy, but I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to get like, oh, I'm going to have sex when I get married. I'm not going to have sex before marriage. And it was just step by step doing that, analyzing. And I studied psychology. And psychology was like 3 years of therapy, which really helped me. And it helped me understand that. And my final year paper was on identity. And like I spoke with other people who were Pakistani, gay, Muslims, and how they lived their experiences and made sense and the impact that it had on the mental health. And it helped me understand myself so much better because I was like, you know what? Fuck everyone else. Like my religion from day one has always been between me and Allah. Like when I pray, do I pray to the neighbor auntie or do I pray to Allah? When I get something from my faith, do I get it from the neighbor auntie or do I get it from Allah? On Judgment Day, is Allah going to judge me or is my neighbor aunt going to judge me or their kids are going to judge me? Or is Allah going to be like, hey, you down the street, what do you think I should do about him? No. So, and this also, like, let's just be real, South Asian Muslims in this country, hypocrisy to the T. Like their kids can, like, I'm not judging anyone, but you don't get to go down the street, smoke and have sex with multiple people and drink and then come and tell me that I'm going to go to hell because I like dick. That makes no sense to me. And I also always tell people, yes, I'm attracted to men, but how the hell do you know if I've had sex with a guy or not? So you're judging me and telling me I'm going to go to hell before you even know what I've done or haven't done. So yeah, through all of that journey and analyzing, I discovered and I feel like I got much deeper into my faith and I got much more comfortable with my faith because I realized that my faith is for me to decide what I do with it. And I literally tell people now, if I go to hell because Allah decides it, that's because I'll be perfectly happy with that decision. But you do not have that power. I have to constantly remind people who like tweet at me or DM me or whatever. I'm like, you can say whatever you want, baby, but you don't have that power. So I think that pisses them off so much that they think that they have that power and they wish that they had that power. And then when you remind them that they don't, it pisses them off even more.
I love doing that. It's because you're holding a mirror to them, showing them that you are not God. The words that you're saying that you're going to tell, are you God to tell me that I'm going there? No, you're not. So settle yourself.
I want to reflect a little bit on the comments on homogeneity that both Harris and Fergie have brought up, because for me, it was not my family or my exposure to the original culture that set me up for the big four that purity politics would bring. It wasn't even madrasa, which you think, okay, you're probably going to learn this self-loathing through madrasa, and it wasn't. It was actually a book or a couple of books from an Islamic bookstore, which had ostensibly been published by some terribly cheap publishing house in the Gulf somewhere and written by somebody who clearly went to a donkey college in Islamabad or something. But it basically like went through list after list after list of, oh, here are all like 180,000 sins that we're going through. And just 60 of them were about, like at least half of them were just about sex in some way. And number two, like listed as literally the worst thing you could do, was homosexuality. Number one was having sex outside of marriage. Murder didn't show up until like 6 or something. And I'm just thinking, this is the kind of material that is published here for a radically different audience for what would be in Paris or New York or Somalia or Malaysia or India or Japan or wherever else. And we're still all reading the same thing coming out of these singular publishing houses that portray themselves as bastions of Islam. And that we have to think that, oh yeah, because there needs to be one ummah at all times and it needs to make sure that it's all perfect and exactly the same across all areas, no matter what, then yes, we should all absolutely accept this as gospel, which is hilarious to me looking back on it now. Oh god, what was the other point? So just picking up on that other point as well, just can't help but think of like Michel Foucault, like effectively describing Victorian sexuality, a time which we think of as being enormously repressed for the way in which people just did not talk about sex. But the fact that people were always saying that we're not going to talk about sex is just another way to make sure that sex is always in front of everyone's mind all the time. It was an intensely sexual society, just it wasn't something you talked about, but the act of not talking about it is what made it so sexual. And then in the same way, I can't help but think that nobody thinks about sodomy as much as bearded men who tell you that being gay is wrong. No one is as obsessed about fellatio and anilingus as the men who signed that really disgusting letter last week. Nobody is as obsessed with our sex lives than the people whose sons go to the same clubs that we do. It's those people who
100%.
think about sex more than we do.
Preach. That's what I have to say on that.
I completely agree. Sorry, my mind's gone a bit blank. One question I wanted to ask everybody, if you feel comfortable answering, is how is actually who's single? I don't know who's single. How is dating for you as a queer Muslim? Because I know for me, it's been very jarring where when I have been dating that I get fetishized a lot.
Yes. Oh my God.
For being Pakistani or for being, well, I don't know if you realized I'm a bit hairy. For being Pakistani, for being hairy, for having these physical attributes that come with me being a Pakistani guy. Yeah, it's a bit ill. It's very ill, to be fair. How has dating been for you guys as a queer Muslim in London?
I think the first question I always get asked is, "How are you Muslim?" And I'm like, what? Like that's the question you always get asked, and I'm tired of answering it. And I'm just like, obviously nobody knows I'm Muslim because I don't put it on my like dating app or anything. But I'm like, I don't drink or I don't eat pork and stuff. And then they're like, why? And then I have to explain because of my religion. They're like, oh wait, your religion? What religion? And then it's a whole thing. So I don't necessarily, I get questions like how more than fetishization of my religion, culture, and my skin tone and my hairiness. It's so, the first time I experienced it, and I was like, okay, first of all, my mother tongue is Sindhi, so I don't even speak Urdu. And Bollywood and Bollywood is a lot of Hindi, and Urdu and Hindi are similar. I don't watch Bollywood movies anymore because I don't understand them, because obviously I don't have that relationship with Urdu anymore. And I've matched with people who are obsessed with curries, and they're like, you should try my curry, I make it so much good. And then they're obsessed with Bollywood movies and they talk about it. And I'm like, I have legitimately no idea what you're on about. I have never. And then they're like, and then the physical aspects of like me being South Asian, like I love brown skin or I like hairy men. And I'm just like, I'm just like, I don't know who told you that this is attractive or like it's gonna turn me on, but it's just not it. It's so gross. It's disgusting. I don't like it.
It's wild that I think that people think it's acceptable to be like, oh, I'd cook you a banging curry, but like, am I going to message Peter on Hinge and be like, yeah, you look like you deserve a mean bangers and mash, I'd love to cook you there? It's just not
like,
it's so weird.
And it's I'm like, who told you that it's okay to do this? And then when you show them that you don't find this attractive at all, they get pissed at you. Like, you should be thankful at the fact that they find you or your skin tone or your hairiness or your culture like attractive. And I'm like, dude, you are literally fetishized. Like, I don't speak Urdu. I don't watch Bollywood movies. Love a banging curry though. But like, I don't know why you think that I'll be okay with it. And then they get pissed at you, and I'm like, you know what? Never mind.
Honestly, I feel like a lot of this kind of comes down to the similar realms of education that sex education sits in. Because while it's all well and good to have that discussion around the physical aspects of sex and protecting yourself from unwanted pregnancies and STIs, the other part is, how the hell do you talk to people? How do you approach someone to say that you are sexually or romantically interested in them? I was lucky enough that in my sex education, it was comprehensive enough to cover the fact that, hey guys, condoms and the pill are not going to protect against what the teacher called hurt feelings, which is an entirely different aspect of.
What school did you go to?
I also studied that class, like state school. I swear to God, I did not go to Eton. Yeah, I mean, but that whole thing there, like, people aren't taught how to interact with others in a way that is respectful and honorable, and at the same time conveying that you are interested in them. So to me, like, if you combine that with just how nasty and racist a lot of the country is, whether on a macro or a micro level, then I almost want to say it's kind of inevitable that people would either go down the fetishization route of thinking, yeah, this is a compliment if I tell you that you're going to be my caramel colored sex god, or if you go down the other route and just wholly reject them altogether and just like swipe left, swipe left, swipe left. But yeah, I've been lucky enough that maybe because I've aged slightly out of Grindr by now, that I am in a happy relationship. I've been together with this person now for 5 years. But I have come across those rather sharp-edged aspects within the kink scene. So they still exist, but I've sort of self-selected myself out of it. Who I do not envy right now are people who are 18, who are 19, who are 20, who are just getting into whatever scene they're getting into. I do not envy that because it is ugly out there at the moment. I do not envy you kids. I mean, I'm sure Asad can talk more about like that aspect than I could.
I'm not 20, I'm 25. But
sure, why not?
You're a baby.
Leave me alone. But it's just finding that fit of again, it's knowing that you don't need to find a fit, you don't need to fit in. It's when dating, you're Muslim. How can you do that? Don't they hate the gays?
Yeah.
Don't people tell you you're going to hell? Or again, when I've dated people in the past who are Muslim and again are going through their own conflict and battle with their identity and whatnot, it can make it very difficult. Again, because it's something that we all have relative within ourselves of, am I right to feel this way? I'm Muslim or whatnot. So we've all so it's very hard dating as a queer Muslim. I'm not dating actively at the minute either way because men suck. But
well, hopefully
it's not easy because the Muslims hate the gays hate the Muslims, and then you've got that select few in the middle who understand who they are and they know themselves, or they're getting to know themselves, and it's just
I'm gonna say something about that because as someone who's from East London, there's a lot of Muslim married men on Grindr who are taxi drivers who are who go to home and they like pretend like nothing happened. Nothing. And not that I did anything with anyone, but nope. They just like
okay. Like 8 years ago, I was in.
About.
I mean, like 8 years ago, I was in someone's family home, and I'm like, "This is girl."
I've been here before.
I mean, come on. I mean, I was on Grindr at the time. Like now,
I recognize this sofa.
No, but again, this is the like hypocrisy that we were speaking about that we very lightly touched upon. That if these married straight men or whatnot, who are on Grindr, who are having the best of both worlds, but again, unfortunately, it's because they feel like they can't express themselves, they can't come out,
100%, yeah,
because of what society and other Muslims have told them, or other people of faith have told them. So it's as much as it's wrong and it's upsetting, it's really sad.
But at the same time, like, don't fuck me in private if you're gonna slap me in public.
Very
100%. That
I'm writing that down.
I think part of the reason why I never participated in doing anything with them was obviously I felt just morally and ethically, I was like, you've got a wife and kids at home. That's just like you're ruining other people's lives for you through your denial and whatever you're going through. And I'm not judging in that sense. That I know it's hard for everyone, but putting other people in that, all that jazz, and just pure sadness. Like I feel like I can't imagine being however old they are and being like, you have to do this in secret. But then anger comes out, which is they will be the first ones to throw stones at us and cuss us out. Even though yesterday I was like on my knees, but no.
Which is wild because you know what? I have felt safer in some nasty basements in Berlin. I feel completely at home there. I feel very much in the presence of trusted men. I know my safe words. I know my limits. I know all of that stuff. I have never felt anything less than safe there. Where I have felt most unsafe is when you go home to somebody who you've not met before and it's a family home and you see pictures of kids and their wife. And you're like, something bad could happen here. Not necessarily 100%. Because of like somebody coming home and finding out, but because this person, because of whatever journey they're on, and I hope that their journey is okay, but if there is any anger there, you're going to be the target of it. So I've never felt less safe than an environment that in traditional suburbia is supposed to be the safest place.
Yeah, 100% agree with that.
I feel like we've been brought up, especially in the UK. I can only speak on my experiences in the UK, in a very east is east type setting where it's very concentrated with our culture and the way we're meant to be and the way we're meant to live, where things are pushed upon us, heteronormativity pushed on us, and we can't break out of that box, or you're not meant to break out of that box. And because you've been told this, a lot of people go the other way and they are hypersexualized or become hypersexual or whatnot in private because they've been told that they can't be this way. And they don't find themselves in a sense. Oh, sorry, that caught me off guard because it zoomed out for a second. Another question I actually had for everybody, and feel free to chime in with anything at any point if anything comes to your head, is how can we break those negative stigmas around queerness and religion? One thing I'll say is literally simply by existing. I always say that my existence is activism because I'm going against the grain of what everyone has always told me and what people continue to tell me that I cannot be, but here I am being. How do you feel like we can slowly break those awful stereotypes that people have around queer people of faith or just queer people who follow a faith, etc.?
Two things. I've got two things immediately for that. Number one, learn your history. Your history is much richer, much deeper, and much broader than what anyone from whichever tiny publishing house in the Gulf can tell you. It is much more diverse than people give it credit for. And the existence of multiple Islams is a documented fact. And you will see that woven throughout history. Do not believe the monolithic narratives that they give you. Study your history. It is out there. And I say that as a qualified historian. Do not come for me. I've got a distinction. Don't try me. Second of all, remember that Islam is not a religion to be found alone. It is not a religion to be practiced alone. It is practiced in a community. Go out and meet those people. Go out wherever you can. If you either go out physically or you go out just by coming to a space like this or whatever, link up and be Muslims together. Because like there's nothing so sad as doing iftar on your own. Do iftars with others as much as you can. Or if you can't find local queer Muslims, do it with allies. Find people who will affirm your faith as it is and break fast with them, break bread with them. And finally, just real quick, I'm sorry about this one, Asad. When you say what can we do to, what was your question? It was like, how can we make people feel
like break negative stigmas around queerness and religion?
Yeah, the final thing I'll say to that is think about who you're doing that for. If you're doing that for yourself, that's fine. If you're doing that because it's somebody you care about, like I want my mother to understand me better, that's fine. You do not need to convince people who do not want to be convinced. By which I mean, if you have these people who are going to bat for the likes of Andrew Tate and his rapist ways, these girls do not need to be reasoned with. You do not need to convince them. In fact, that was so liberating for me, watching all these girls who I thought, oh, I've been trying to convince them the whole time of my validity as a Muslim. I'm done. You can have him. You can have that.
I think that's what broke the bread for me. The moment I saw everyone going back for him, I was just like, wait a minute. I've been trying to gain their respect and their approval. I've been trying to get into this. Are you mad? Nah, that was it for me. I was like, thank you for doing this for me because this made my life
it was so liberating.
Yeah, it was very, very liberating.
Knowing which fight is your fight and where it's wasted time talking to a brick wall, because there's some people you really don't need to reason with. And there's some people that you really don't need to explain yourself or defend your existence to, because it's not worth it, and because they're never going to be willing to hear you as well.
Precisely.
I do not know any homophobic Muslim who has ever come up to me and said online even that, oh, I used to be really compassionate. I used to love everyone. But then I read the Quran and I realized, no, I can't be like that anymore. It's always been, I'm homophobic to start with. Now I will eisegetically pick out the stuff that I think is going to attack you the most. These people do not come from a place of compassion. The whole point of Islam is radical hospitality and unconditional love. If your readings do not adhere to those two spirits, you're wasting time. Like, I do not have time for that version of Islam.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think from my sort of lived experience, touching on what Kesha said as well, I think there was a lot of space for personal unlearning to get to a place where I could then live as somebody that could sort of be this political entity as we are as queer people of color, that's more authentic to who I am, who I believe. And what I experienced was that sometimes, at least in my experience at that time, the sort of pathways in front of me were very sort of white to pursue, to discover myself, which was a lane that didn't serve me well in terms of sort of like building social network, getting to know myself, because it really wasn't for me. It was in a group of people or a cultural space where I could really learn about myself from. So I had to go the long way of like sort of attaching myself perhaps to the most available pathway to then finding the right pathway for me. And that's not to say that there's one is wrong than the other, but for me, it goes back to what Kesa said about discovering sort of looking at life through my own cultural lens and through my own history. Was a path that I hadn't touched on, that actually ultimately like has helped me a lot now in sort of like helping myself resonate with myself a bit better. So finding spaces that sort of exist, intergenerational spaces, if possible, for queer sort of South Asian Muslims is, I think, to have them, to sustain them, and to then sort of disseminate them is probably like, I think, a good thing to do.
100%. And really quickly, how do you think people who are new to London or the UK, how can they find these spaces and these people?
Google.
Again, I think Google and Insta was a big thing for me. I again, like for some whatever reason, maybe I was just really naive and not tech forward, but I found it a little bit challenging, especially when you move to a new city for work. It just felt quite daunting. But Instagram was a great. I basically went on Twitter, Instagram, like looked at some tags that said London queer Muslims, found who I did, followed them. Like didn't know them, but just followed them, and like having them in my feed was like a great gateway to kind of like then seeing what they were doing or going to, and it kind of just like grew from there for me.
I think once you follow one person, at least one person or two people who are South Asian queer Muslims, you end up finding a community, because I said I found like a majority of people, and then through that I've grown my network, and I'm like, oh, there's a lot of people, more people than I initially thought. So that's been great. Twitter is a great thing.
It's literally for me, because I came out during the pandemic and then I joined Twitter. We've had a question come through which I'll read in a second. It was when I realized that I wasn't the only one, because I've been sheltered and grown up under the thumb for so long. I thought I was the only queer Muslim. I didn't know they existed, or that was a term for it. And then I realized, wait, there's so many Muslim lesbians, bi-Muslim people, gay Muslim people, wow, and they're all amazing, and they're really cool people as well, and they're very expressive. And I was like, wow, shit, it's not only me. And then you just sort of band together, or you cherry pick, and you find the people whose morals and principles align with you. And I feel like over the years, I've definitely done that.
100%.
Again, social media has been huge in propelling me into that.
If I could leave one more thought, if that's okay, have a bit of hope as well, because sometimes, despite what you see in the cacophony on Twitter about the people's worst opinions coming out and the ugliest sort of rhetoric hurled your way, whether Islamophobic or racist or homophobic or biphobic or transphobic, people in real life sometimes really can surprise you, and usually are willing to some degree meet you halfway. They might not join you at a pride parade, they might not attend your wedding, but I think we ought to give some people a little more credit where it's due and be surprised at where they can meet us. Because if we're not going to be open and loving, then what's the point of being Muslim?
But that's exactly goes in hand, where I feel like it's about choosing your battles and knowing where you can actually meet people halfway. It's about their hearts already open. It's just meeting them there. I feel like definitely with families, or with my family, I can speak on that. That's where I am with my parents. They are understanding to a degree, and honestly, take your wins where you can.
I came out to my cousins 2 years ago, or like a year and a half ago or something, and the way I was surprised, they were like, we already knew, and I was like, fuck you guys, thank you for not telling me that you're gonna be okay with it. They're like, we wanted you to take your time, blah 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 blah. But even cousins who live in Canada or cousins who live in Pakistan, they're like, yeah, our love for you hasn't gone away. It's not gonna go away. You're still the same Fergie that we know and grew up with. And that was a huge surprise to me. You always have the what if situation, which is like, yeah, you might think that they're liberal and progressive and whatnot, but there's always the possibility that it can go wayward and you might be disappointed. But I was very pleasantly surprised. So I think give people a chance.
Definitely.
I think it's about sort of having some, like for me, what worked was having certain personal boundaries. I mean, I always said that like nothing in my parents' life changed overnight, but to them, from their perception, me. So me coming out overnight to them is a change, and we'd love to believe in this beautiful Western narrative of them, like, you know, being all like wonderful about it.
Throwing you a
So
pride parade.
Yeah, you do have to allow them sometimes, especially because given their conditioning and their life lived experiences, it is not a good change. But again, it also comes with applying a certain amount of a boundary, because, you know, to understand sort of what is acceptable for what time period within that. But I do definitely think, you know, overnight changes are quite challenging for people of that generation as well.
Yeah, it took us years to come up to ourselves. Let's give our parents some time too.
Exactly. Right. It's about, it's a process. It doesn't happen overnight. For me, it's still going. Like, again, when it comes to setting boundaries and things like that, it's stuff that's all learned over time, especially if you've not been taught that growing up. But I just want to thank everybody for this conversation today. We've covered a lot. It's been amazing, and I feel like we should definitely have a dinner in person to discuss a bit more if you'd be down.
Well, I'm vegan, so you know.
Mark Whiting, your reflections and for your comments. Honestly, that's really, really lovely. Thank you so much. But yeah, I want to say a huge thank you to you all, Sir Harris and Fergie. I feel like this won't be the last of us. I think we've got more to talk about. But yeah, thank you so much. If anybody has got any more questions or comments, you can leave them on YouTube or drop us a message on our socials, which I will share around after. But yeah, I just want to say a huge thank you to everybody for today.
Thanks for having us. It was lovely meeting you all.
Likewise, and we'll definitely do a bit of a Dishoom dinner in August.
Yes,
we're not doing Dishoom, not low rent.
I've always wanted to go to Dishoom.
It's good food. It's good food. Don't try it, Kessler. It's
good. You go to steerage, I'm going to first class, yeah?
No, I know someone there who will give us a discount. So, you know, the Pakistani...
Okay, yeah.
I'm not waiting outside for second-rate dal that I can make better at home, yeah?
We won't be waiting outside, don't worry. But yeah, thank you so much, everybody. And yeah, I just want to say thank you for giving up your time and amazing conversation.
Thank you so much. Bye, everyone. Have a good evening.
Lovely day. Bye.